Really is for me the top story of the day. The Assam-Mizoram border situation that remains tense a day after police forces and civilians in the two states clashed. The CRPF has taken over the disputed police posts. Assam Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma has asserted his government will not allow the encroachment of his state's land by Mizoram. It's a battle between two states that's scarring the centre. Take a look.
A 150-year-old festering border feud flaring up. A deadly clash erupting from the long-standing Assam-Mizoram border dispute. Shocking images of a gory blood fight come to fore at the disputed border point, claimed by both states since 19th century. At least 5 Assam policemen were butchered by suspected goons and alleged policemen from Mizoram after a spate of gun battle when Assam cops went to the no man's land. Both states blamed each other for triggering the deadly clashes. India Today was the first to reach the clash site, locally known as Lailapur, on the Assam-Mizoram border, which is now being patrolled by the CRPF troops to maintain peace.
इस वक्त करीब 5 कंपनी ऑलरेडी उस जगह को अपने कब्जे में लिए हुए। महानिरीक्षक जोरहाट ऑफ सेक्टर, उप महानिरीक्षक सिलचर रेंज एवं उप महानिरीक्षक अगरतला रेंज समेत सीआरपीएफ के वरिष्ठ अधिकारी घटनास्थल पर हैं और शांति बनाए हैं तो लगातार प्रयास कर रहे हैं। स्थिति अभी वहां पर शांतिपूर्ण है।
Many of the injured showed bullet wounds and injuries sustained in the deadly clashes.
उन लोग पोजीशन ले लिया और एक टाइम में उन लोग अचानक से हमला कर दिया और ये अचानक हमला से हमारा असम ऑफिशियल और असम का पुलिस कोई भी तैयार नहीं था।
I am standing at the location where violent clashes took place between Mizoram police and Assam police yesterday. Even as a political fight has broken out between the two states, an uneasy climb prevails at this spot, which is now being manned by the CRPF personnel.
While the centre mounted vigil and launched peace bid, Assam Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma paid tribute to the slain cops and visited the injured, recuperating at Silchar Hospital.
If tomorrow on the video that comes that Assam police is firing at some innocent people and some people file high court, we have to reply. The way now Mizoram has to reply when we are going to file that petition in Supreme Court. So we started talking from 11:30 till 4:45, and during the day Home Minister Amit Shah has called both of us not less than 4 times. Then he said that tum log dono baat karo, fir we were talking. Then we decided on an agreement that this will be the agreement. Then suddenly firing comes. But খালি মই অসমৰ ৰাজ্যক এটোৱে জনাব খোজো যে we have not backtracked. Our people may have died, but we are there, we are solidly there, we are defending our constitutional boundary as long this is our boundary.
Himanta earlier had a Twitter face-off with his Mizoram counterpart over who began the fatal transgression. Assam has declared a 3-day state mourning over the deaths of policemen. The national flag will fly at half-mast and there will be no public entertainment.
Assam Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma says that it is the duty of his government to protect reserve forest land. Even after Union Home Minister Amit Shah spoke to the Chief Ministers of Mizoram and Assam, the war of words continues between both of them. With camera person Kiranjit Das, Prema Rajam in Kolkata for India Today.
So let's try and understand what's happened there. What triggered this Assam-Mizoram battle? Why were the chief ministers of two states unable to calm tempers? They even resorted to a Twitter battle. Was the centre late in intervening? What really is the backstory? Joining me now are two people who really track events across the Northeast very well. Kaushik Deka is Deputy Editor at India Today magazine and Patricia Bukim is Editor at the Shillong Times. Thank you both very much for joining me. I think a lot of viewers want to understand, Kaushik, in the first instance, before I come to the blame game that's going on, what really happened, Kaushik? Is this in Assam police versus Mizoram civilians? Is it the two police forces over an area which is not properly demarcated in terms of the land border? Is this a long simmering conflict? Just explain it to us.
It's definitely a long simmering conflict because the route is at the demarcation of the two states. Lusai Hills or Mizoram, which was annexed to the British India in 1890. And there was a treaty between British and Mizoram in 1875, if I'm not wrong, which actually demarcated the boundary. And later there was another treaty when Mizoram was annexed, the Lusai Hills, which is now known as Mizoram, was annexed to British India in 1933. Now Mizoram goes by the 1875 treaty, which was discussed with them, and Assam government insists on going by the 1933 treaty. So basically there is a confusion about the boundary and both governments are not in agreement. But beyond these legal nuances, the local people have no idea about which one is Assam and which one is Mizoram actually, because that's a forest area, as you, Dr. Sharma also has said that this is inner line forest reserve, which is around more than 500 square kilometer of area. There is a forest reserve, and obviously the tribal people on both sides and people residing in Assam side also, they both try to encroach because there is always a quest for more land, more fertile land.
But is the battle between the two, and let's get clarity, is the battle between the two police forces or the Mizoram civilians and the Assam police?
No, if you go by the incident, the July 26 incident, then it became a Assam police versus Mizoram police thing. But primarily it is a battle between the people living on both sides of that national highway that's going on in the Lailapur and the Mizoram district. So basically this is about land, this is about encroaching forest area, and the conflict then escalated. It got a political turn when the Assam police went and checked the encroachment, because Assam police goes by the 1933 laws and whatever is on record. Then Mizoram people will claim that this is our, as many Mizo people will say, these are traditional areas, these are hunting grounds, these are our cultivation areas, and Assam police is pushing us back. So eventually it became, because there is no clarity on the border and you have to understand the local dynamic. Without understanding that, if you go by both sides, both governments, if they go by legal, whatever is in the rule book, then obviously these conflicts can never end. And if you remember today, the Assam CM said a very interesting thing. He said that these things will continue unless and until the mindset changes.
The fact is, you're saying this is a decades-old conflict, but it's erupted. It's erupted to this time in a manner that it hasn't in a very long time, and therefore questions will be asked, Patricia Mukim.
It did erupt in 2018 also.
Yes, but but you haven't had 6 policemen being shot dead in the manner that they were yesterday.
This is where the difference is. For the first time, police versus police encounter happened.
Yes,
where 6 policemen were gunned down.
The question therefore is, Patricia Mukim, the 2 chief ministers, what was astonishing to me as an observer is 2 chief ministers were attacking each other on social media. They could not pick up the phone. They were appealing to the Home Minister to resolve the issues between Mizoram and Assam. Ironically, when the Home Minister himself, Amit Shah, had been in the Northeast just last week and had held a meeting of all the Northeast CMs. Now, what does that suggest to you?
Well, look, from what the Assam Chief Minister had said just now in Assamese, he had made a sort of a appeal to his people, saying that not an inch of land will be lost to Mizoram. To me, this looks like a battle of egos more than a battle of borders. And from both chief ministers, this is a kind of an assurance to their respective people that not an inch of their borders will be given or will be allowed to be taken. And yet the point of discussion at the meeting between the 8 chief ministers and the Union Home Minister Amit Shah on the 24th of this month was that there will be a give and take, because it's not possible to do any, to sort this issue out in any other way. And in the past, people have proposed that these contested areas could become special economic zones where both sides would benefit. But this has not been, you have the Ministry of Donor, which is supposed to look at all the northeastern states. They could have become the arbiter, if you ask me, because then they could fund
No, but it's
projects
been festering. But Patricia, it's been festering for decades. My point is, are we seeing the resurgence in a way of competitive regionalism, of Assamese identity versus a Mizo identity? Should that worry us?
That's very much there. And I'm quite surprised that nobody is talking about the Assam-Meghalaya dispute. There was a dispute even in the Meghalaya side of the border at almost the same time that it happened in Mizoram. The Meghalaya Electrical Corporation was going to plant some electric poles, and those poles were pulled down by Assam police, and there was a huge altercation between the local residents and the Assam police until 2-3 MLAs and MDCs had to go and pacify things. So, these are very contentious borders, and bloody skirmishes have occurred in the past and will continue until and unless some resolution is taken. And when the Union Home Minister came to Shillong, he made it very clear that these border disputes should be resolved before India celebrates its 75th year. And then you see 48 hours after what happens.
Very interesting that, Kaushik, the Home Minister Amit Shah comes to Shillong, holds this meeting with Northeast Chief Ministers. You've got Hemanta Biswa Sarma, who projects himself now as a strong man. And as Patricia says, neither the Home Minister nor the Assam strongman are able to resolve this situation with Zorang Thangma and the Mizo people. What does it show? That are these conflicts of a kind that they cannot be resolved without give and take?
It certainly can be resolved. The interesting part is that it happened within not even less than 48 hours. And Hemanta Biswa Sarma is not only the strong man, he is also the convener of NEDA, which is not his Democratic Alliance. And MNF, Joram Thanga's MNF, the Mizoram government, is part of that NEDA. So that cooperation should always have been there. And it's really interesting that it escalated to Twitter. And we saw it in public display. But more interestingly, in June only, there has been a committee formed to do a documentation by the Union Home Ministry to do a documentation of all the border disputes. Not only Assam, Meghalaya, Assam, Mizoram, but Assam, Nagaland, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, wherever there are border disputes, and to document the causes. So after this Shillong meeting and this committee being formed, this escalation, and if you have noticed in both cases, the involvement of Assam police, the aggressive nature of Assam police. So somewhere we have to also understand that in the last 2 months, you have seen since Hemanta Biswa Sarma took charge, he gave a free hand to Assam police to combat all forms of crime. And in this process, probably they have got emboldened and they are going perhaps beyond what was actually mandated.
No, but that is precisely it. That is precisely it. That if the Assam Chief Minister is going to play the role of this Assam strongman, it's going to lead to insecurities across the other states.
It's not like that. It's not like that. When you follow the rules, the Assam police, if you go by the rule book, they haven't done anything wrong when they try to protect the land, the Assam's land from encroachment. But these are not police thing. These things need political solutions. So probably there was a kind of miscommunication or some mistake where the political solution became a police solution, and this is where we need to.
No, but this is where Hemanta Biswa Sarma needs to relook.
Assam government needs to focus
this is exactly.
So this is now claiming. He is also claiming one more thing, that this drive against drugs that you have seen in recent times, that has antagonized a lot of antisocial elements in the entire structure, in the entire northeastern structure. So these conflicts also could be provoked by someone who is deeply dissatisfied with this Assam government's drive against drugs, and also the ban on cattle smuggling.
Okay,
now, cattle smuggling is a huge business. So those things will also come up.
Let me take that to Patricia.
Patricia, in a political way.
Is the problem that Hemanta Biswa Sarma is using a police solution, or is accused today of using the police to settle what should be political solutions?
Yeah, if you look at his Twitter record today, he said that 4,000 armed battalion would be placed in the Assam-Mizoram border. 4,000 armed people. Can you imagine that? It's almost like waging a war. We are not trying to resolve international borders. We are trying to resolve borders within the country.
Right.
And this is the attitude of the Assam Chief Minister. Now you have to remember history also. Assam had tried to impose the Assamese language on the tribal people, and that was the reason for the breakaway of all these states. So it's a long story of the big brother bullying smaller states and so on and so forth. And of course, there are these tribal sentiments. And then in recent times, you've had the ban on cattle. And every state, every state relies heavily on Assam. Assam is the link state. So if cattle don't come or are not allowed to come or are inhibited from coming, then there's a problem because for the tribes, it's the only protein that they know.
Very, very interesting the context that you're giving. As Assam attempts, as some would say, to play big brother, some of the old conflicts are resurfacing and they need to be managed politically, not through police action. That's perhaps one of the messages that's coming from this tragic conflict on the border. This is an intra-India, intra-border in this own country. It's not, as has often been the case, of problems across the border. Kaushik Deka, Patricia Mukim, for shedding some light on a contentious, sensitive issue. Thank you very much for joining me this evening here on the news.